Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, unless you were one of the people on the chopping block of an ever-eventful Black Monday. So plenty of news to get to today, but also some good old Guillotine Championship notes and just some good old-fashioned player talk. Dudes talking ball on another edition of the Fantasy Life Show. So thank you guys as always for tuning in. And accordingly, I am joined by the one, the only Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain, happy wildcard week. Here we are.
Happy wildcard week, man. And some good football in week 18, some preseason games, but we also had some really good football. I was hoping the game last night would be a little better, Ian, but it was a great game. If you're a Detroit Lions fan, man, wow, that defense stepping up in a big way. But yeah, man, I think this is the best football weekend of the year, in my opinion, for the NFL wildcard weekend.
I did not get to catch a lot of the action yesterday. I had Red Zone going on during, my 11-hour car ride back from New York. So that was fun, listening to. But Dwain, Quentin Johnston had 13 catches for 186 yards yesterday. That happened.
Yeah, Quentin Johnston went nuts. It was him and Lad McConkey, but Quentin with an absolute huge day. And Justin Herbert, man, just balling out.
I just love how every year there's a couple of these week 18 performances that kind of go under the radar because obviously the fantasy season is over, but not today, not on my watch. QJ, we appreciate you for that. So do have a bit more relevant news to get to. And accordingly, guys, it is time for Mike's hard-hitting news report. Appreciate our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. However, Dwain, I do think Tyreek Hill could maybe use a Mike's Hard Lemonade because he is not happy with his situation in Miami right now. My man's is requesting a trade. Seemingly, we had a weird quote after the game where he said, "This is my first time I haven't been in the playoffs. I got to do what's best for me and my family, if that's here or wherever the case may be. I'm finna open that door for myself. I'm opening the door. I'm out, bro. It was great playing here, but at the end of the day, bro, I got to do what's best for my career. I am too much of a competitor to just be out there." So that was one thing, Dwain, but then the man doubled down on Monday, actually going to his Twitter profile and changing his picture to a Photoshop of Antonio Brown when he left the field in his last game with no shirt on. And yes, it is now AB with Tyreek's face. So, you could maybe call that a red flag, Dwain.
Yeah. Interesting path to go. It is a team sport. Tyreek Hill, the Dolphins definitely had some struggles this year. Quarterback play being one of them with Tyler Huntley. But, look, Tyreek Hill was also part of what was going on here, Ian. I mean, we had multiple games where we didn't have Jalen Waddle. And even then, he couldn't get the targets that we were used to seeing from him. So really, Jonnu Smith, once he emerged, it limited everything that we saw from Tyreek Hill. Not saying he's washed, but he's going to be 31 years old. We talk about archetypes. Man, those players that really depend on their speed, I think they are the most fragile archetype. Now, some guys can hang on to it. Deshaun Jackson hung on to it for a pretty long time. But I think our days of thinking of Tyreek Hill, obviously at least going into next year and the way we're going to rank everyone, regardless of where he lands, we're not going to be ranking him as a top 3 guy. I think probably like if he were to land with the Chiefs and they brought him back, obviously Hollywood Brown's probably gone in that scenario. Xavier Worthy been really good down the stretch here. Got Travis Kelce getting older. I mean, we're probably ranking him as a top 12 guy, but he's still going to come with some risk.
Be some other cool locations. I do believe the Commanders, low-key, would be nice. Compliment the alpha to Terry McLaurin. We can say that. Chargers would be cool. Even the Cowboys, I think, would be a fun situation with a healthier Dak. But again, just, Dwayne, Tyreek's accomplished more than I have in my life, more than I ever will, presumably. But I will say, man, again, when you have a disagreement with your employer, maybe don't change your profile picture of that. Like, I'm sure, Dwayne, you're going to be negotiating some nice contracts for yourself in the future. If you change your profile picture, though, to AB with your head photocopied, over him, I think you get some questions asked. Not so sure that would help you get those goals. We will see if it works out for Tyreek. The other big news, though, from Monday, obviously, the coaching carousel is well underway. Not for the Cowboys because they tend to take their time and drag out things that maybe don't need to be dragged out, but for plenty of other squads. Patriots went ahead and fired head coach Gerard Mayo. The Jaguars got rid of Doug Peterson. Kept their general manager Trent Baalke, though, which was interesting. Seahawks also parted way with offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. Bengals got rid of their DC Lou Anarumo. So, Dwayne, overall thoughts again on an eventful Black Monday.
Yeah, I mean, the Jaguars, I think that's an exciting job. Trevor Lawrence hasn't lived up to expectations, but man, we like the weapons around. And we've seen what a guy like Kevin O'Connell's been able to do with Sam Darnold. We've seen what Brock Purdy's been able to do with the 49ers. I mean, this is a pretty good room. Brian Thomas Jr. really emerging as a potential high-end wide receiver one in the league. And then you got complementary pieces behind that with Evan Ingram as well as Christian Kirk. So really interested in that one to see who lands there with the Jaguars. If it's the right coordinator, right head coach, that would be really nice.
T-Law still does not turn 26 until next October, so rare to again find an alleged franchise quarterback certainly being paid like one in a situation where, again, you can get that head coaching job without the guarantee of having a new GM, though. Would think that maybe takes away the chances of getting someone like Ben Johnson to go down south. Other big one is obviously New England, where Mike Vrabel does seem like the odds-on favorite to get that job. We will see what happens there, but apparently two potential franchise quarterbacks in New England, Dwain, with Drake May and Joe Milton showing out in Week 18.
Man, Joe Milton, and then the backflip in the end zone just to show off as a big dude. He was out there throwing lasers. I didn't see much arc on a lot of those balls. I don't know if everything's like a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, but that dude has amazing arm talent. The Patriots are an interesting one, Ian. I do agree, Mike Vrabel probably the front runner there. And if there's anybody that can come in and win without any good wide receivers, like you can just see Mike Vrabel like scratching it out. Hopefully they'll go get some wide receivers for Drake May. We would appreciate that. But yeah, that's a big one. I think the other one, that's really interesting, producer swing is probably real. And we've known this one was coming. But the Bears, we'll see where they're going to land. But the Jets are interviewing everyone. Did you get an invite for an interview?
I mean, I didn't want to publicly bring it up and try to make it a big deal, Dwayne, but
I'm figuring you did. Literally everyone is getting an interview with the Jets. So, hey, at least they're leaving no stone unturned, I guess.
They are doing something over there in Jets headquarters, so we will see what goes down there. Obviously, the Saints are also another squad who will be going out there trying to find themselves a new head ball coach as well. So probably more to come. The Bears are actually requesting an interview for Mike McCarthy, which again just makes the entire charade that much funnier. So more news, I'm sure. Stay tuned, and we will be right here to give it to you guys. But before we move on, did want to give a shout out again to our presenting sponsor, our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade, because guys, with the fantasy playoffs in the rear view mirror, maybe you took home a championship, maybe you got eliminated in round one. Either way, you worked so hard to get this far, and accordingly, we are here to remind you that Mike's Hard Lemonade is the reward for a hard-earned thirst. That championship will make sorting through waivers and dealing with sheesh moments worth it. So go a cold, refreshing Mike's Hard Lemonade, because hard days deserve a hard lemonade. All right, Dwayne, Utilization Tuesday, but a twist, because obviously we are getting into the playoffs, and just wanted to help anyone out there that will be, again, participating in some of the fun fantasy playoff opportunities that are really abundant throughout the industry, specifically over with Guillotine Leagues. As you guys know, us at Fantasy Life, big time fans of Guillotine Leagues. You can find all of our offerings over at guillotineleagues.com. We have the Chopionship, we have the Guillotinies. Again, a lot of different options here to help you get some skin in the game with the playoffs. So Dwayne and I are actually going to be building a Chopionship roster throughout today's show. But in the meantime, did want to again tier up, rank, and break down position by position as well. So Dwayne, we're going to be starting off at quarterback, where you took the privilege of again tiering up the remaining players in the playoffs. So 14 teams, and accordingly, you have two tiers that are building up the top 8 players. Tier 1, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Jared Goff. Sitting down there in tier 2, you have Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and Justin Herbert. So overall, just kind of thoughts on how you decided to make these two tiers and these top 8 quarterbacks your go-to players.
Yeah, so a few quick things. Number one, these ranks are really for everything, guillotine included, but you've got to think about each contest you're playing in and specific rules. But the way that I rank these players, Ian, obviously we're using the utilization for the players, but then we're using their odds to make the Super Bowl. And then I also looked at the lines for this weekend and their seeding. So essentially, we want players on good teams that we think can advance. It's pretty straightforward. Like, we want the teams that are going to be alive the longest. The better we can do with trying to guess that and work through that, the better we're going to be at building out these rosters. Obviously, the utilization still being really key. So yeah, this is the top group. I mean, obviously you look at Josh Allen, number 2 seed, you got to weigh that up against Patrick Mahomes, number 1 seed for the AFC, but not going to play in week 1. So if you're thinking about a league like a Chopionship, where if you don't score enough points in that first week, 25% of the contestants get cut, you got to really think about that. And especially if you're just going to roster one quarterback, which is one option. If you do go with Mahomes, you're going to have to carry two. So it's not that Mahomes is necessarily worse than Josh Allen, but they're pretty close. And we know Josh Allen's going to play in week 1. So that's really the framework that I used here. So mostly you're going to see the teams that have the best Super Bowl odds, and then we're using their fantasy points, obviously, for quarterback.
Accordingly, man, I was a little bit surprised to see Jared Goff cracking that top 5 tier, not trying to slight the man or anything like that, but just more so a circumstance of, one, he's not exactly a top 5 fantasy quarterback, doesn't have the legs that we see from these other guys, and 2, the reality that, yes, the Lions did earn themselves that first round bye. So thoughts on Goff and I guess Detroit, are you that confident in them having the edge over teams like the Vikings, like the Buccaneers, where we did see Baker and obviously Sam Darnold have nice portions of the season as well?
Yeah, it really comes down, honestly, that they've got the best Super Bowl odds of any team, plus 280. So, I mean, that's better than the Chiefs. That's better than the Ravens, better than the Bills. So when you look at the odds makers, they've really got the Lions there. And that's what gets them into this tier. And even when I wrote Jared Goff up, and you guys will be able to see it in the utilization report, we'll have it up either later tonight or tomorrow early morning. And whenever you look at it, you're going to see, look, you're going to read this and think, this guy doesn't belong in this tier. But again, this is a different game that we're playing right now. And Jared Goff, man, averaging 25.4 fantasy points over the last 4 weeks. We've got a beat up secondary for the Lions. I know they came out and played a good game against the Vikings, but can they really hold up like that game after game? Hopefully they get Aiden Hutchinson back, could get some reinforcements. But man, this Lions team looks like a team that if it's going to make it to the Super Bowl, they're going to have to score a lot of points. So I think that does squeeze Jared Goff into the bottom of this tier.
Is there a tier 2 quarterback that you prefer? Obviously, Darnold, Baker, and Justin Herbert making up the 3. Not trying to tell you who to pick, Dwayne, but I will say Justin Herbert leading the Chargers offense that have scored more points than anyone during the final 3 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, look, I put them all in a tier together because I think that's a really tough question. But I 100% agree with you on, Justin Herbert. I think this is a team in the Chargers where there's a lot of players you could potentially like because, man, they get this matchup, like you mentioned, with the Texans. They're 3-point favorites there. They are a team that can run. They play some defense, so they should be able to travel. Now, they're used to playing on the West Coast in those warm confines of the dome. They're not used to having to play in a lot of bad weather, but I do think they have all the elements to their game. Also, pretty good special teams play. So I do think the Chargers are a team that could go on the road and make an upset. You look at the Bucs, if they do well, the one thing there, though, Ian, is it has to go through Baker Mayfield because their secondary is not good. Like they had another safety get injured yesterday. Now, the run defense has been pretty good, for the Bucs. If I were to name their 2 strengths of their team, right, it's the run defense and the passing offense. And then if you look at Sam Darnold here, man, like Sam Darnold, is a guy that was potentially going to be the number 1 seed in the NFC with the Vikings. Obviously, they lost that game against the Lions. But look, anybody can show up and have a bad game. So it honestly is really tough to pick between these 3. And Ian, that's why I'm going to do multiple contests and all these things I'm entering. I'm not doing one Chopionship because I really want to mix up the players in these tiers. But I do think if you want to differentiate your lineup, you've got to think about one of these quarterbacks or at least players from these teams sitting here in tier 2.
And accordingly, Dwayne, let's go ahead and get into it. Guys, it is time to help build a championship roster. We are into the draft room, Dwayne. But before we start, I did just want to clarify what we are talking about with the championship. Again, heading over to guillotineleagues.com, we do have the championship where you select a 14-player team, 8 starters, 6 reserves, and there's no actual draft. You can pick whoever you want. You can take as long as you want. Just know that the bottom 25% of the lowest scoring teams will get cut after every round, and there is no free agency, no fab opportunities, unlike traditional Guillotine League formats. So who you take originally will be your squad for the rest of the way. So again, there are several different contest sizes. You can start with a 25-team league. There will be 7 remaining by the Super Bowl, or you could do 500 teams and there'll be 125 by the time you get to the last round. Maximum, though, and this is key, everyone, 3 players permitted from every NFL team. So you can't just take 8 Bills and 8 Lions. You're going to have to, again, spread things out, and it'd be 7 and 7, by the way, 14-player max. So 1 quarterback starter, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and then 2 flexes, meaning RB, wide receiver, and tight end. No super flexes in this house. So with all that said, Dwain, you actually hit on earlier, I think one of the biggest decisions you have to make when you start this off. Do we want to go with just a single quarterback, which would be the Josh Allen types? Because yes, we do need to survive the first round. We need someone who's going to be playing in the wild card round. Or do we want to go 2 quarterbacks and then have a chance to get Mahomes and Jared Goff on the squad?
So the way I'm looking at this, I'm going with Buffalo and Detroit in the Super Bowl. So you've got to work through these scenarios.
You have my notes.
Backwards.
Like, what is this, Dwain? I had the same exact idea.
I don't. But if that's your scenario, going back to what you just said, Jared Goff, does he really belong in that same tier of other guys? He does, because he's the odds-on favorite to go to the Super Bowl. But if we get to the Super Bowl and it's Buffalo versus Detroit, there's no way we're starting Jared Goff. And if Buffalo makes the Super Bowl, we know it's going to be because Josh Allen is going bananas. If we look at Josh Allen, Ian, since they've basically been in playoff mode, dude's averaging 32.1 fantasy points per game. So I like the idea of saving the extra spots here for the other positions and going with Josh Allen. To your point, if we do some other rosters where maybe we want to go with Mahomes, we're going to have to pick up a second quarterback in those. So if I'm going to build out a Jalen Hurts, or I'm going to build out a Buffalo Bills, offense with Josh Allen, I like the idea of going with 1 quarterback.
I do think it's a great point where, again, if we do reach the Super Bowl here, we are starting Allen every single time. If it was more of a best ball, we're getting our roster optimized after, every single week's action, that'd be one thing. But again, we do have to make those starting decisions. Will be Josh Allen each and every time out. So we are going to go with just for the sake of argument, though, Dwain, because let's face it, it was not Josh Allen as the QB1 this year. That was Lamar Jackson, maybe poised to take home his 3rd MVP award. Look, I do think the Bills are the more complete team than the Ravens, but we have seen a turnaround. I mean, my goodness, we talked about that. Just absolute dumpster fire of a Ravens secondary the entire first half of the year. So based on the odds, based on your own personal feelings, what do you think the gap is between the Ravens and the Bills?
I think it's pretty small, to your point. And so I'm going to build rosters through Josh Allen as well as Lamar Jackson. If I only got to build one, I am going to go with Josh Allen. I do think they've been slightly better. A little worried about what's going to happen with Zay Flowers. He's day-to-day with the knee injury. But we've also seen Lamar Jackson put up massive points, whether or not he has, really good passing game weapons. We've seen it for a long time now because he is so good on the ground. And we know in the playoffs, Ian, when it comes down to it, he's not going to hold anything back. If he needs to run, he's going to run. Withholding that one game against the freaking Chiefs where it kind of got crazy and the Ravens just decided they weren't going to do that. But I love Lamar Jackson. So I would build out the roster similarly. It impacts what you're going to do here, right? I mean, if you're taking Buffalo, you're obviously going to pick at least 2 more Bills because you're saying that they're getting the Super Bowl. If you were to build this out with Lamar Jackson, you would also do the same thing as we got to the other positions.
Dwain and I just going out of our way to not even discuss the possibility of Patrick Mahomes and company making the Super Bowl. What could go wrong there? So obviously they have a great chance. They could freaking win their 3rd in a row. But I do think, man, like Dwain, I was looking at the point differentials for just every team, every playoff team remaining before the show. And it's incredible, man. The Chiefs plus 59, that's 3rd in the AFC West, man. Not the AFC. Their own division, the Chiefs have the 3rd, point differential in there. Could they turn it around? Have they been playing better? Absolutely. They're going to have another bye to figure it out. But I do think this could be the year that we finally get another representative from the AFC. So let's move on and talk about some running backs now, right after a quick word from our friends over at DraftKings. Grab your favorite team's jersey and some snacks and head to the couch for another Sunday of action-packed football. You can get even closer to the action with my partners at DraftKings. And right now, all new DraftKings customers who bet just $5 will get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. That's right. New customers get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins after betting just $5. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use the promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Time for some RB utilization goodness, Dwayne, breaking down our tier 1 and 2 RBs. And yes, we do have two pretty clear-cut winners at the top. Jahmyr Gibbs, who did finish as the overall RB1 after that 4-touchdown masterpiece in Week 18. And of course, Saquon Barkley, who again was just 100 yards away from breaking Eric Dickerson's rushing record. But Nick Sirianni decided not to be petty and chase records for the first time in his life. So really does seem to be these two and everyone else. That said, James Cook and Derrick Henry not too far behind either.
Yeah, and again, similar way that we work through this. We're looking at the Super Bowl odds. We're looking at the players' utilization. We're looking at their Week 1 matchups or the matchup they don't have. So obviously, when you look at Jahmyr Gibbs sitting here at the top, does not have a game in this. He's got a bye in Week 1. And then if we look at the other three guys, though, we are getting games from all three of these players. They're all highly seeded. We've got the Eagles sitting at 2. Barkley's obviously been amazing. James Cook, utilization score a little bit tricky and only a 6.5. Not near what we have with Jahmyr Gibbs at a 9.3 since the loss of David Montgomery. Now, we could get Montgomery back, looking pretty optimistic. We'll talk about him more here in just a minute. But Cook, it hasn't bothered him. Like, he's still scoring all these fantasy points. I know they got this mantra right now in Buffalo of everyone eats. Well, James Cook has been able to eat, and we do like the seed. We like the offense overall. First offense in history to throw for 30 passing touchdowns and rush for 30 rushing touchdowns. So they're doing it every which way. And James Cook, the guy that people thought, man, he can't get the role inside the 5, led the league in touchdowns rushing. So, yeah, we've got that going for us with Mr. James Cook. And then if we look at, obviously, Derrick Henry's a beast. Like, I mean, what is there to not like? It's the number 3 seed. So, yeah, I think these are easily your top 4 guys.
So we're working with Josh Allen right now, and I know I drafted some best ball teams last summer where I thought, hey, James Cook, obviously a talented receiving running back, has some drops here or there, but we don't see many running backs get the opportunity to have the sort of downfield targets that Cook regularly earns. However, Dwayne, I mean, hasn't had a catch since Week 16. And even before that, man, just has not been a staple in the passing game. Ty Johnson, usually the running back the Bills want to use when they are in more clear-cut pass-first situations. So with our team already going heavy with Josh Allen, do you think stacking Allen with James Cook is actually something that we want to be doing?
I still want to do it just because I just mentioned it. 30 passing touchdowns, 30 rushing touchdowns. So they're not necessarily just because one has a good game doesn't mean the other is not going to have a good game. Allen could have a great game and we could still get 2 rushing touchdowns from James Cook because the way the offense works. And again, we're making bets on teams here. So if I'm looking at the Bills, now we'll need to get contrarian somewhere else, but I feel like with the Bills, like, you got to look at Josh Allen and James Cook. Those are the top 2 players from that offense. So if you think they're going to the Super Bowl, I think he is in play.
Lord knows we saw the Ravens beat just fine with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry both putting up absolutely bonkers numbers this season, again, despite Henry's lack of a receiving role. So let's move on to our tier 3 RBs. Again, these are Dwayne's RB 5 through 13 for the playoffs. David Montgomery, Bucky Irving, Aaron Jones, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, J.K. Dobbins, Kareem Hunt, Joe Mixon, and Isaiah Pacheco. So you do have about 8 or 9 running backs here. Dwayne, how big of a difference do you see between the guys at the top and D-Mon and Bucky versus, say, Joe Mixon and Isaiah Pacheco?
Yeah, they're in the tier for different reasons, right? The reason that we have these Chiefs running backs, obviously, like, man, in a one game, we're going to take Bucky Irving over those guys. In one game, we're taking Aaron Jones over those guys because you have Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt splitting duties. Joe Mixon, we're taking over both of those players in one game. But again, we're trying to map out what do we think is going to happen as far as getting to the Super Bowl. And when we look at the Chiefs, they've got the second best odds of winning the Super Bowl behind only the Lions. So that's how those guys make it in, is because we think that they're going to play more games. But if it does come down to, like, man, if suddenly the Bucs surprised everybody, Ian, and made it to the Super Bowl, you're going to like Bucky Irving way more than you're probably going to like Kareem Hunt or Isaiah Pacheco, unless an injury dwindles that thing down to more of a one running back backfield situation. So it really does all come down to how you want to game this thing out. We love players like Bucky Irving. We love players like Josh Jacobs sitting here at number 8, man. Nobody's been hotter than Josh Jacobs over the last 4 to 5 weeks of the fantasy season. I mean, you just can't argue with it. Jahmyr Gibbs, yes. But after that, I mean, really, Josh Jacobs has been right there with Saquon Barkley. So this really does come down to how you're thinking through your brackets. And one other tip here, Ian, so when you're doing this, you guys should be thinking about, okay, if you've got the Chargers and then you've got the Texans playing each other in that first game, you should not have the running backs from those two teams together on your Chopionship squad. You shouldn't have J.K. Dobbins plus Joe Mixon. One of those teams is gone after one game, guys. So put your chip on one or the other if you want to go with one of those teams. And so I really work my brackets out ahead of time. So I've got, just real quick, I've got the Ravens beating the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're 9.5-point favorites, the biggest of the weekend. Then I've got Buffalo beating Denver. Obviously, we've already chosen Bills. And then I've got the Chargers, to your point, beating the Texans, who backed into the playoffs. Then I work out the next round. I got Buffalo over Baltimore, Kansas City over the Chargers, and the divisional round, and then in the championship round, I've got Buffalo over KC. So, and then you do that same thing over on the NFC playoff side. But that ultimately, I map that out first. And then you can do different scenarios. We're not saying that's exactly what's going to happen. That's actually a pretty chalky bracket, but you can run some other scenarios out. And then that helps you start to determine how you want to work these tiers based on, what you're in that, in what you like to say, in that alternate universe or in that simulation of the universe where the playoffs work out a certain way. That helps you think about how you want to build out your roster.
So continuing with that, Dwain, let's look at the NFC and what you're thinking about could go down here. So Eagles over the Packers, I think that would make sense, 2 versus 7. Assuming Jalen Hurts is indeed going to clear the concussion protocol, that is obviously one of the bigger news items to keep an eye on. Obviously, Lions have their first round bye. Buccaneers versus Commanders, man. Lean Tampa Bay, but that is a 3-6 matchup that I could almost see going either way.
I agree. So I have in this simulation of the world, Ian, I do have Tampa Bay over Washington, but that's a really good spot. Like that's a 3-point game. That's a good spot if you want to differentiate. I think a lot of people will lean to the Bucs just because they're the 3 seed. But when you think about it, the Commanders going on the road, you're a 3-point dog just to start for being on the road. So basically Vegas is saying that's a coin flip game, to your point. Then we've also got a similar situation against the Rams. I don't feel as strongly about this one, but Vegas has that at 1.5 points. So, I mean, I do think a lot of people will lean to Minnesota, though. I know that the Rams are the 4 seed, Minnesota's the 5 seed on the road, but still a 14 win team. And how well the Vikings were playing before. So those are the little things you have to work through. In this simulation, I do have the Vikings. I have a pretty chalky, squad here for this first go at it, Ian. But those are the type of scenarios where if you think the public has a strong leaning and it's that close, those are good spots to go the opposite direction.
Week 8 was certainly a long time ago, but that 10-point win for the Rams over the Vikings, man, really was the most definitive win over the Vikings until what happened on Sunday night, obviously. So good stuff there. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of your tier 3 RBs. I don't know, we actually just did that, Dwayne. Let's go ahead and get into our Chopionship RBs and continue building this roster. All right, Dwayne, we went with 1 quarterback. So with that in mind, we did buy ourselves an extra roster spot potentially. So we'll get into tight ends if we want 1 or 2 there in a little bit. But let's say we do end up choosing to go 2 tight ends. Again, 14-player roster. That would leave us with 11 guys left. So we can go 6 running backs, 5 wide receivers, vice versa, 4 and 7. What are your overall thoughts on kind of the right number of players? Because again, unlike some of these bigger regular season contests, we do only have 2 wide receiver spots to fill.
So I think it does come down to, again, to how you work your bracket out and looking at the strengths of those teams, right? They're going to be making it further into the playoffs. And then that kind of determines how you want to think about allocating the roster spots. But I think, looking at the running back specifically, I do think, James Cook is in play here, Ian. I think Jahmyr Gibbs. I know those are chalky, but we don't have to get contrarian yet. Like if you're saying it's going to be the Bills versus the Lions in the Super Bowl, like, you don't want to overthink things. You're also going to be really freaking happy. Remember, guys, 25% of the field's getting cut every week. So a lot of teams that also have these players could be getting cut early. There's going to be a lot of people that are just going to build their rosters wrong right out of the gate. So you're not going to shoot yourself in the foot because you're listening to this show. So I do think those 2 are gimmies right now. Then I think, I have it as Detroit versus Philadelphia in the championship game in the NFC. So I think that means Saquon's in here. Because think, if for some reason Detroit doesn't win and you still get Saquon, when I look at the Eagles, I think we need 3 of them. I think if you look at the Chiefs, we probably only want 2 Chiefs because we've got 3. We're going with the Lions in the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs and the Lions are both on bye in that first week. So I think if there's a team we wanted to skimp on for the championship round, which would be Buffalo versus Kansas City in the AFC and Detroit versus Philly in the NFC, it would probably be going with less on the Chiefs, maybe just 2 Chiefs. So I think if we go 3 Eagles, that means Saquon has to be in here because we're not using Jalen Hurts.
I'm with you. Cook, Gibbs, Saquon, definite, just lock them in and forget about it for me. Do we want a Chiefs running back? Because I feel like people keep waiting for Pacheco to take over this backfield. And again, we have seen Andy Reid and company start to turn over the backfield to more of one featured running back into playoffs in past years. But almost, Dwayne, all of the damning stats that we have for, Kareem Hunt this year, he's not explosive, he's not breaking tackles. Those all apply to Pacheco. He's been really bad this year. And guess what? Yes, he has been hurt. Also, guess what? He's actively hurt again with a rib injury, man. Like, there is a chance we see Kareem Hunt going out there, racking up 20 combined carries and targets.
I think it's certainly in play. And I think this is the right question. So I think we haven't talked about wide receiver or tight end tiers yet. But when I look at tight end, like, let's say Kansas City did make it, to the Super Bowl, and we wouldn't have a quarterback, because can't say if it's Kansas City versus Detroit or Philly, doesn't matter. We went with Josh Allen. I do think Kelsey is going to make sense, though, because he would still give you like a potential chance. You're probably not, depending on how big the contest is you're in. Are you playing in a 25 teamer? Or are you playing in a 500 teamer? So that also kind of dictates how you're going to think about these things. But I'm thinking Kelsey, you're going to want, because I could see us potentially starting him, in the second to final game. Like, we could start him over, I'm kind of giving things away, but like, I think we're going to like Laporta. He's a way to differentiate. Like, we could maybe skip on Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I don't think I can go with the Chiefs here in this first build, but I'm open to it. Like, I do agree with you. It could come down to being two. They've both been kind of gross, though. And I think the Chiefs passing game is starting to pick up. So I think there's a build where you could do it. You could certainly put the Chiefs running backs in there. I would rather not on this one, but you can twist my arm, Hartitz.
Again, we do have to try to figure out these onesies allocation to help figure out the running back and wide receiver. And Dwayne, we can't go with Kelsey and Laporta, because then we're not going to have a guy in the first round. I almost wonder if we want to go with someone like Mark Andrews on the AFC side and then have Laporta, where he can get us through the last couple rounds, and then Andrews first. But again, we can kind of hash that out at the end. Don't necessarily have to fill all these right now. So if we did want to go ahead and add at least one or two more running backs, Dwayne, who would you be thinking?
Yeah, I was considering a 3 tight end build, but if we go 2, yeah, you can't do the 2. But so I would say then at running back, I would still probably say be out on the Chiefs running backs. The question is, do we want to throw David Montgomery in? And look, we can come back in full flex spots later. I say we could go with the 3 running backs we have and come back to the flex question.
I'm cool with that. Thoughts on fading Derrick Henry? I kind of want to.
Well, I mean, we're saying we kind of have to, because the Buffalo Bills are going to beat the Baltimore Ravens in round 2 of the playoffs. So in this scenario, like, if we had Kansas City, and Baltimore playing in the championship game, you're not fading Derrick Henry. And it's not that Derrick Henry can't still help you. He still could. I have us down as being able to take either one Charger or one Raven. So I do think we could come back and potentially have Derrick Henry in the lineup. I would say let's hold, and let's see how the rest of the team looks.
Let's hold for right now. Again, got Josh Allen as our onesie quarterback.
He's Derrick Henry, man.
He is Derrick Henry. I'm not even waiting for next regular season. I'm already talking about fading the big dog. Shame on me. So again, right now we're sticking with James Cook, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Saquon Barkley. We'll see if we can squeeze Derrick Henry in there at the end. But first, a quick word to our friends over at Game Time. Dwayne, we both know there's nothing like being at a game in person. I can only imagine what it would be like to be at a playoff game. Maybe not the one you went to last year when you got to see Jordan Love rip your Cowboys' hearts out, in a high definition at Jerry World, but another one would be cool. And accordingly, I hope you would use Game Time. It is certainly my go-to for finding amazing tickets, but not just for sports, also for concerts and shows too. I was actually scrolling through the Game Time app the other day, and I came across this new feature called Game Time Picks, and it is a total game changer. Game Time Picks curates your experience, showing you the best details on great seats, and they make it so easy that it is truly a no-brainer, people. Seriously, Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can find out for yourself by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using the promo code LIFE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LIFE, L-I-F-E, for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. Wide receiver season, Dwayne, in one man's stands alone in tier 1. And why wouldn't he? He is our one true sun god. I was mad, man. I spent the last week in New York, got to go to the Met, which was a, cool museum and all that. I tried so hard to find like an actual sun god thing to go give Amon-Ra a shout out. But unfortunately, that is a very big museum. I couldn't quite get it down. But again, he's chilling in tier 1. Meanwhile, tier 2, you have your wide receivers 2 through 10, AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, Jameson Williams. Congrats on breaking 1,000 yards, by the way. Devonta Smith, Xavier Worthy, Khalil Shakur, Mike Evans, and Ladd McConkey and Puka Nacua as well. So thoughts on maybe some core members here who you would be wanting to get into our lineup?
Yeah, again, we're talking about the top teams and then the top players, combining the utilization with, the odds of advancing these teams. So when you look at the Eagles, like I did have to put AJ Brown and Devonta Smith in tier 2 just because they haven't shown the ceiling upside in a passing game that we have seen for the Lions. Obviously Amon-Ra is sharing a little bit more as well. Laporta's come on here recently, Jameson Williams playing well. But when you look at the Sun God, man, like look at these last 4 games, man, 9.5 utilization score, averaging 23 fantasy points per game. Ooh. So absolutely just rocking out. AJ Brown, though, not far behind, utilization score setting at an 8.0 for the season, averaging 16.7 points per game. Devonta Smith, man, really closed out the season on a strong note. 8.7 utilization score over the last 4 games. Now, we have not had Dallas Goedert back until this past weekend, and Devonta Smith didn't play. So none of the games in that sample I just shared with you had an additional target earner to deal with, but Devonta has been very hot. Obviously, looking at Justin Jefferson, man, like if you think that Minnesota is going to win that first game, like he's definitely in play, and I do have them winning it in this simulation of our timeline. Obviously, people know Justin Jefferson's good, so don't need to talk about too much more. Jameson Williams is interesting, right? So he's one of these names that like climbs towards the top because we've got the Lions so high. If you're building out a bracket and you're saying that the Lions are going to lose in round 2, and they have a bye in week 1, obviously you would be avoiding all the Lions. And that would be a nice contrarian way to think about building out, one of your rosters. Xavier Worthy's the last one I'll mention here, Ian. There's so many guys here, man. These guys are all playing, really well. But Xavier Worthy over these last 4 games has been the number 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs. Hollywood Brown, obviously going to be earning more playing time, so he could really eat into some of that target share. But at the same time, man, if Hollywood gets going, are we not so sure that Patrick Mahomes doesn't just start balling out? I mean, Patrick Mahomes is already averaging 19.9 fantasy points over the last 4 games, so not in the same range as Josh Allen and some of these guys are scoring 28 and 30 fantasy points per game, but still, like his passing numbers are up as of late. So there is a chance that it could just be, kind of like Buffalo. Everyone eats, including Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown and Travis Kelce. It is Patrick Mahomes after all. So again, like the rest of these guys, really good players, Mike Evans, Ladd McConkey, Puka Nacua, but they're in that middling to lower end range of how far do we think they can advance in this thing.
And that is kind of with Worthy's participation recently, specifically, what makes the Chiefs scary, because they might just be figuring things out, man. Once they did get Hollywood back into the lineup, saw Worthy's ADOT drop from 9.4, which it was in weeks 1 through 15, all the way down to 4.1. They're getting him rush attempts. And accordingly, man, he's had 11, 14, and 14 combined carries and targets here over his past 3 full games. Only Deebo Samuel wound up with more carries than Worthy among wide receivers during the course of the season. So, again, maybe didn't quite put up the same sort of rookie season as the Brian Thomas Jr.'s, Ladd McConkeys, and Malik Neighbors of the world, but still maybe peaking at the right time. Moving on to some of the tier 3 wide receivers, Dwain, lot to list, wide receivers 11 through 24. So just wanted to maybe touch on a couple guys, specifically Jordan Addison, who I was surprised to see maybe not crack your tier 2. What made Addison more of a tier 3 player relative to fellow, you could say, overqualified number 2 wide receivers like J-Mo and Devonta Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just really comes down to the teams that we think are going to advance. When you're playing these playoff contests, we have to lean into the teams with the better odds to advance. But in a world where the Vikings win this first game and then they actually end up playing, say, the Lions in the second round, that's going to be their most likely, assuming that the Eagles take care of the Packers, right, and assuming the Bucs take care of the Commanders, then they would be going to play the Lions. Well, that's a divisional foe. I know they just got beat by the Lions, but I mean, if anybody can knock off the Lions, like I think it would be the Vikings sitting there at the 5 seed. Obviously, it could be the Commanders if they were to beat the Bucks. That would open up the Vikings. That would be optimal, because if we see Washington beat the Bucks, that means Washington has to go to play Detroit in round 2, and then that would mean a potential better matchup for the Vikings. Although it might not get that much better, you probably got to go to play the Eagles if that's what happens. But there's a chance, like if Green Bay were to get an upset, you could get a home game as the 5 seed. Green Bay would then travel. So it'd take both Washington and Green Bay winning to get a home game for the Vikings. But like, they're a good team. They've won 14 games. So I think you could make an argument that I have Jordan Addison too low, Ian, but it just comes down to being that 5 seed. It's just such a tough road, to try to make it all the way to the Super Bowl.
And again, really just does come down to all these assumptions about what teams you will think will advance at the end of the day. Jalen McMillan sitting in this tier, 7 touchdowns in his last 5 games. Awesome end to his rookie season. But Terry McLaurin actually finishing below him, which again might seem wild. We're talking about a top 15 fantasy wide receiver, 13 touchdowns on the year. But if you think Bucks are going to beat the Commanders, which again, Vegas is predicting they're at least favored to do so, you can see why, again, you should be favoring the Bucks wide receiver 2 here. So final note would just be Courtland Sutton and George Pickens chilling there at the bottom. Look, we do not expect the Broncos to win. We do not expect the Steelers to win. That said, maybe those could be the sort of players where if you are going hard in the paint on the Chiefs, on the Lions, they could at least help you get through round 1, because again, would be surprising to not see these guys get at least 8 or so targets out there.
Yeah, they could. And I think they could help you differentiate your roster. I'm probably still going to avoid them, though, because they're probably one and done. And I think there's some other names like a Ladd McConkey could win in week 1. Say he beats the Texans, and then he's going to get a week 2 game as well. So I still think taking a player like a Ladd McConkey would be my preferred option. I will say this, though, and you bring up a really good point. Like, if you think for some reason you just want to get contrarian, you think the Broncos, maybe you're just a big Broncos fan, go all in on the Broncos then. You should, in a simulation where the Broncos make the Super Bowl or the championship game, Courtland Sutton is going to do amazing in this contest, and he shouldn't rank at 23. So if you're going to do a run out where the Broncos are better, you would adjust these ranks. These ranks are, again, set on the odds and everything today. But if you're saying, I want to make a team where in this reality the Broncos make it further in the playoffs, you have to have Courtland Sutton on your team. And the beauty is we already know he's a good player. The bet you're making is on the Broncos doing more than what people think. When you start talking about some of the better teams, Ian, the way you get contrarian, like if we talk about the Eagles, it's maybe you switch out A.J. Brown to go with Dallas Goedert, because not many people are going to do that. But there is a run out where Dallas Goedert ends up being the better player. Again, comes down to field size. I'm doing that in a 500-team contest. In a 25-team contest, I'm not going to have to, you don't have to make as many of those big decisions.
Final shout out to Mr. Courtland Sutton, 81 catches, 1,081 yards, and 8 scores on the season. Again, had that infamous week 7 Thursday night goose egg where he didn't even earn a target. Since then, though, weeks 8 through 18, wide receiver 7 in total PPR points, even with a bye week thrown in there. So really was a great end to the season, and proven that, yes, he can be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. So with that said, Dwayne, let's go back to our Chopionship draft. Time to take some wide receivers. Seems like there's 3 pretty clear ones we have to take here. Again, building off the 2 teams that we expect to be there. We have 2 Bills right now, but I'm guessing we want Khalil Shakur, and then with Jahmyr Gibbs, that would give us the opportunity to take Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams if we want, unless you are thinking Sam Laporta, it may be a better bet.
Yeah, I like Laporta because if we've got Buffalo versus Detroit, we've either got to take Kincaid or Laporta. Like, we have to have one of those 2 for the Super Bowl game. I lean Laporta. Like, he's really been hot down the stretch. I mean, if we look at Laporta over these last 4 games, I get it, folks. This is the beauty of playing in a Guillotine League in the fantasy playoffs, because you're sitting there going, man, screw Sam Laporta. He ruined my fantasy season. I took him in round 3 or 4 of my draft, and he sucked. Well, over the last 4 games, he's got a 9.3 utilization score, Ian, a 21% target share, pretty close to the numbers we had from him in his rookie season, averaging 16 fantasy points per game over these last 4. Yeah, a little more crowded with Jameson Williams, but the ceiling on that passing game is also a little bit higher this year. So I think we've got to take one. We've got to take either Laporta or Kincaid, and I kind of lean with you. I think I like Shakur over Kincaid. I know they like to let all these guys rotate in Buffalo, but Shakur's been the one guy out of that group that's kind of proven, man, he can overcome that and still give you some fantasy goodness.
I am 100% with you there. And I don't have a problem with, again, if we want to ride with Laporta in those final 3 rounds, I'd rather take Mark Andrews in round 1 and then just kind of be done with him if that is what it comes to. So good stuff there. I locked in Shakur in our one true sun god, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Other than that, man, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, just 2 guys we should probably get in there.
Well, I'm thinking here, since we don't have Hurts, we do have Barkley. The question is, do we go AJB and Devonta Smith? Because we're saying it's the Lions versus the Eagles in the championship game.
That's true.
And what that would also do is if the Lions get beat by the Eagles, we would be okay. We would have 3 Eagles then going in to face the Bills, or we have 3 Lions going in to face the Bills. So I think we have to have 3 Eagles. Now, the other option here would be you could use Goddard, as well, and you got a 2 tight end build, and then for sure in the Super Bowl we either have Goddard or Laporta going in. But we'll have to make that decision, and it'll be tough.
Yeah.
Well, we won't in the Super Bowl. It'll be made for us, but we'll have to make a decision the week before, which will be tough in the championship game. So
I kind of like that call though. Let's go ahead and assume we're going with Laporta and Goddard.
Okay. I like it. And it's going to be different. So that means we go AJB and Goddard instead of AJB instead of AJB and Devonta.
Yeah, we've seen the splits. You've talked about them, at length before. So that will give us Saquon, AJB, and Goddard from Philly, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Gibbs, and Laporta from Detroit. So we are now sitting here with just 3 wide receivers. Again, looking at Buffalo, KC, seems like Worthy would be a good bet here as well, Dwayne.
I love it. Yep, I was going to say Worthy for sure.
Okay, we will get him in there. That is fantastic.
So what do we got? We've got 3 Bills, right? We've got 3 Lions.
3 more open spots. Yes.
I'm just saying we've got 3, because just a reminder, guys, you get max 3 players from each team. So really, I'm trying to. I think you want to target building your rosters around 5 to 6 teams. You have to, 4 teams times 3 is 12. You got 15 roster spots. You got 14 roster spots. So that basically leaves 2 extra roster spots out of the 4 that you think are in the championship game. Now, that's the way I'm approaching it. That doesn't mean you have to do that, but I want as many players available as I can in each round. And so that's the way I would lean. So we've got 3 Bills with Josh Allen, James Cook, Khalil Shakir, Detroit Lions. We've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. We've got Jahmyr Gibbs. And then we've got Sam Laporta. We've got, I believe, 3 Eagles. Is that correct, Ian? We've got Saquon Barkley, Goddard, and we've got AJ Brown. What is it? Saquon, AJB, and Goddard. So we're full on Eagles. So championship game, we need 2 Chiefs. We have Worthy and who? Now we can come back to your question of Kareem Hunt versus Pacheco, or do we want to go with a Kelsey? But we left it open that we could build a 3 tight end team here.
Let me go ahead and just put these tight ends here. We're going off script. Let's just get it right here. And
I know, but it's hard. It's hard. We'll still talk to the tight ends for you guys next, and we might come back and change this when we get to the tight ends.
Absolutely. So right now, again, we have 4 open spots remaining with Laporta and Goddard there. We could go with Kelsey as well. It's a tough call, man. These bench spots are making me think.
The other option would be Hollywood Brown. We know that his role is going to get bigger, and he could explode. Like, he could absolutely explode. So we wouldn't go Mahomes, even though we already said we're a 1 quarterback build, because we're saying the Bills are in the Super Bowl. Right. If we look at the Bills, we've got a running back from the Bills. Detroit, we've got a running back available. So we could go with a running back here. I think it's either Hollywood Brown, honestly, at wide receiver, or it's one of those 2 running backs you talked about earlier, putting a chip either on Kareem Hunt or Isaiah Pacheco. I think the ceiling is higher for Hollywood Brown than either of those 2 players.
Let's go and lock in Hollywood then. I am fine doing that. So let's find him somewhere on this lovely list.
He might be under Marquise.
Hollywood Brown, welcome to the squad. Gives us 3 open spots left. So again, that means we have a little
That's
more.
That's 11 players from our championship weekend, which is Buffalo, Kansas City, Detroit, and Philadelphia. You guys could choose to go with 12 players and take another player from the Chiefs, but because, remember, Detroit and Kansas City are both on bye, and that's why we're not going to do that. We're only going to go with 2 Chiefs here.
Only 2 Chiefs for now. We're going to finish up the rest of this right after we get through our tight end tier. All right, Dwayne, pretty clear cut here. Tier 1, tight ends 1 through 2, Travis Kelce and Sam Laporta, who I think we can all agree should be there. Again, 1 seeds, favorites, we understand it. Tier 2, a little more interesting, though. Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert, then Dalton Kincaid. Again, just under more of the expectation that we expect the Bills to be going further than someone like the Minnesota Vikings. Because for me, when I first looked at it, that was the question. Kincaid over Hawkinson. Again, more of a play on the Bills. Your Tier 3 tight ends, accordingly, TJ Hawkinson, Noah Gray, Isaiah Likely, Cade Otton, and Zach Ertz.
Yeah, and we've got so sorry, I'll come back to our team construction in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself, but Kelce, I know he hasn't been as strong here down the stretch, but still a top target earner, obviously, for the Chiefs. You guys don't need me to tell you that. Laporta, we just talked about, has really come on over these last 4 games. Also, just a very interesting way to think about your Lions constructions, and another reason why kind of leaving Goff off up top. I really like that build now, assuming that we get the Bills to the Super Bowl. We could build the same exact lineup, Ian, but with the Ravens making the Super Bowl and having a Ravens team instead of the Bills team. There's so many things you guys can do with this thing. But yeah, looking at Mark Andrews, man, like this is another player that I know probably makes you really mad when you think about him, but this is why playoff contests are so fun. You look at these last 4 games, man, an 8.1 utilization score, 13.6 fantasy points per game. He's giving you 10.4, 13.8, 14.8, 15.4. I think he's definitely in play for our squad here. So not quite in the Laporta tier, 1 tier down, because he doesn't get as many, his route participation's lower, so he has a lower utilization score. Now, we already talked about Dallas Goedert a little bit earlier. Haven't seen him much this year, Ian, and it is more of a run-heavy offense. So I think if you are betting on the Eagles, it's fine to bet on Goddard. If I'm not choosing the Eagles to be the team that I think's making it further, probably not as interested in Goddard, but he's still here in this tier. Dalton Kincaid only makes it because the Bills, have such strong, odds as far as the Super Bowl goes, right? And you're getting to play, if they make it, you get them playing in the wild card round, you get them again in the divisional and the championship and the Super Bowl. So you get 4 games out of a player like Kincaid. That helps him make up ground over some of these guys that have more playing time than him. So it really does come back to how many games we think the Bills could play for Kincaid. Then if you look at tier 3, again, these are some of the teams that are lower, like Hawkinson, got a tougher road to get there. Buccaneers, Otton, we could certainly see it happening. Isaiah Likely still getting the other half of those snaps in Baltimore. We've seen him definitely have flashpoint games. Zach Ertz with the Commanders. And then the one other name there is a team that we really do like, but it's Noah Gray. And we've definitely seen Noah Gray have some spike games, Ian. So he's another interesting name. And he is a way you could differentiate on your Chiefs lineup. If you're playing in a 500 teamer for the Chopionship, Noah Gray is a name you could consider even over Kelce.
Great stuff, Mr. Dwayne. Again, everyone can check out your article over at fantasylife.com, and I will also be having some playoff rankings with all sorts of good tidbits as well. So Dwayne and I will finish off this roster another time, but again, you guys heard us break it down. Core again, Bills, Lions, looking at the Eagles as well, and some of these Chiefs players. So before we get out of here, though, Dwayne, let's go ahead and fill up these final 3 roster spots. All right, right now sitting with that 2 tight end build, I do think since we're not going Kareem Hunt, Dwayne, this would be a decent team to add Travis Kelce to.
Yeah, since we have the 2, we could do it because we know we're going to have a tight end from the NFC in the Super Bowl. If it for some reason was the Chiefs, we could do it. The other option, though, Ian, is we know that the Buffalo Bills, and sorry, not the Buffalo Bills, but you've mentioned Mark Andrews. We've got the Ravens playing 2 games in this scenario. We've got the Chiefs playing 2 games in this scenario. We have got the Minnesota Vikings only playing 2 games, losing to Detroit in the second round of the playoffs. So Hawkinson would be in play. Tampa Bay, we have playing 2 games. Cade Otton. So really all these tight ends are in play. So they're all playing 2 games. It's just a matter of, do you want to get 2 games earlier? Or do you want to get the 2 games, later in the playoffs? Because some of these are going to be playing in round 1 and round 2, and then the other guys we have playing in round 2 and round 3 of the playoffs.
I almost feel like if we go Kelce, then we're just, again, setting ourselves up with your 2 top tier 1 players, really solidifying that. And then I'd like to attack maybe those other teams with some of the running backs associated with them.
Yeah, because that's where my mind's at. Like, do we want another 2 running backs? I think we probably need 2.
Like, again, look, if we had now Derrick Henry and Bucky.
Yeah. Or you, and you could build out the same exact lineup again, and you go Dobbins instead of Derrick Henry. Like and Dobbins would give you a differentiated lineup early. But yeah, if we're going, let's just stay chalky on this one. I would say Derrick Henry. We get 2 games out of him, and then we love Bucky Irving. We're getting 2 games out of him.
Again, guys, really is just best advice I think, Dwain, I could give you. Focus on who you think those final 4 teams are going to be. Focus the heavy majority of your energy on getting the top players from them. Again, though, if you do want to be trying to get some of the extra guys, don't be doing it in the first round matchups where one of them is guaranteed to be chopped before, again, you can even make it into these next few rounds. So great stuff, Dwain. Just the final, again, kind of picture of the squad for everyone listening. We appreciate you. Josh Allen as our QB1. At running back, we have James Cook, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Bucky Irving. Wide receiver Khalil Shakir to stack with Mr. Allen. Our one true sun god, A.J. Brown as well. Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and then triple tight end build with Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, and Dallas Goedert. So a bit chalky, Dwain, but I'm feeling good.
Yeah, the weakness is the wide receivers, right? And we're really needing Khalil Shakir to come in along with AJ Brown in week 1, because we've got the Chiefs wide receivers, which are going to both be on bye in that week 1, and then we've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. So we would probably go back and tweak this, guys, and change one of those running backs out for a wide receiver. But again, we're thinking through it live on air. And that, honestly, that's the beauty of playing these, is just all these different facets and things that you can think about. So just have fun with it. And I think my favorite part, again, is what you said, making the bracket and saying who's going to be in those championship games in the Super Bowl, then working backwards. Guys, if you're building a roster out that's from 10 teams, that's not going to work. You want to consolidate down to 5 or 6 teams that you're really focused on, like Ian said.
I subtracted Bucky and put in Justin Jefferson. So now feeling just a little bit better
baby.
About that, Dwain.
Let's
see. And you guys can, again, go see for yourself over at guillotineleagues.com. Go enter any of our many championship contests. You can also just do a free version if you're just trying to go have fun, not invest too much money in it. So all that for you guys, and all that and more on the way on the Fantasy Life Show, again, the rest of the week. So appreciate you guys tuning in. For Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for checking out the Fantasy Life Show. Until next time, take care, everybody.